Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is a virtual award ceremony for our exhibition Small Wonders. It has been curated by Lillian and Bayley Hoover, and this has been put together by one of our interns at the MFA, Marissa Evangelista. She's done a great job in coordinating everything and getting everyone here. As for myself, I'm the new exhibitions manager, and I will be kind of forwarding the program. So I'm just going to introduce Ms. Hoover. Lillian Bayley Hoover is an artist and a lecturer at Towson University. She earned her BFA from the University of North Carolina, Asheville, and her MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art. She has recent solo exhibitions, which include Presence and Absence at Goya Contemporary, and she has another solo exhibition that is scheduled for this fall at Mocha Arlington. Her work has appeared in numerous group exhibitions, and she's received many honors, including the Pollock Krasner Grant in 2020, three individual arts awards from the Maryland State Arts Council, and the Treywick Prize. Her studio is located in Baltimore, so please, if you have a chance, go check it out. And you can see more of her work and learn more about her at lillianhoover.com. So now I'm just going to pass it off to Ms. Hoover. She's going to give her statements and talk about the show a bit, walk us through her process, her thought processes, and what went into her picking the piece. So, Lillian.
Recording in progress. So traditional media, to more sort of discipline-defying mashups. You'll see figure, landscape, still life, lots of different subject matter, and a wide emotional range as well. There's a sort of wistful melancholy about some of the works. There's silly humor, biting humor, pleasure in the mundane, anxiety, joy. They all try to show us something from a fresh angle, or make somewhat idiosyncratic connections, or revel in the weird or awkward. Often a context has been either eliminated or altered so that the viewer is asked to return to the world with fresh eyes, as opposed to seeing the world the way that we have maybe fallen into habits with. I think in short, I would say the unifying thread here is really the variety of ways that artists have chosen to really draw out the visual or emotional or narrative tensions that they're exploring. As is the case anytime works are selected for exhibition and then specifically awards, there are many more pieces deserving of recognition than there are opportunities for awards. And my hope is that folks won't be terribly discouraged if they don't win one in this particular exhibition, and to encourage everyone to continue applying for everything you can, and eventually that persistence will yield some results. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I guess we are talking about the selections. All right, so this is one of the pieces selected for jurors. There's 5 Jurors' Choice Awards and 5 honorable mentions. So this is one of the Jurors' Choice Awards. I think one of the things that's particularly striking to me about this work is the care and attention that has been invested in what feels to be a fairly banal moment that we all have probably experienced walking down the street, noticing the sort of haphazard arrangements that we discover in our daily routines, and finding an opportunity for appreciation, or really a sort of quietly poetic sort of engagement with our environment. I think that's what drew me to this. I think there's also just a really strong attention to composition and materiality. The physicality of the piece is important. I don't know if you guys can see in the textures here that there's not just a smooth application of paint, that there's a physicality to the surface. All right, so as I mentioned, there is quite a range of media that were selected for awards and also subject matter and styles. This one has such a wonderful sense of tension to it, and awkwardness, to be um, more precise, in that tension that is really delicious. The balance and relationship between the positive and negative shapes, the arrangement of the palette, and very strange, almost anxious accumulation of mark that feels a little bit frenetic, grounded by the more stable, broad swaths of color and value. That little bit of excitement with that bit of pink pulling our attention into the upper right-hand corner. So really on a formal level, I think the piece is just really exquisite in balancing the various visual elements, but also on an emotional level, just the way that it evokes a feeling of frenetic energy trying to be calmed or gathered. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to see the works in person yet, so I haven't gotten to really appreciate the tininess of this piece. It really is something that I've only been able to kind of guess at through the images that I've seen. Even with that limitation, I can feel the preciousness of this tiny world that has been established, this tiny little landscape that becomes a precious container or box for something hidden or concealed. The handling of the material is really lovely. The poetic quality to the juxtaposition, largeness of landscape, and the complete tininess of the object, right? That this is a large thing that has been made so completely able to be held or worn. That poetic quality just really struck me. And the craftsmanship is just lovely. Again, formal, more abstract sort of concerns here. Really strong dynamic sense of movement, really strong sense of, again, tension. All of the pieces that I think I chose have a really strong tension between one force and another, right? So this one has this wonderful tension between positive and negative shapes, stasis and movement, um, elegance and solidity, and again, really well crafted, just a very refined structure. And this one, I think, is pretty astonishing to have managed to pack so much into such a tiny uh, space, both in terms of rendering and detail, but also in terms of emotion and narrative um, implication. I don't know if you guys are seeing the scale here. This is a 10-inch by 10-inch painting, and it just feels like an enormous emotional world, um, beyond the exquisite handling of the material and the rendering of the paint. I think there's something, again, really poetic and lovely about this attempt to either release or contain that light that is emanating from inside this mouth, maybe simultaneously trying to release and contain. There seems to be a certain amount of anxiety connected to this moment here. Color palette is exquisite as well, and just the sort of life in the hands. So now we're on to the honorable mentions here. I think one of the things that's really lovely about this work is the dynamic handling of the material. There's a lot of movement, in this case, not necessarily through composition, but really through brushwork, how the paint is literally laid down on the panel. I think there's a really strong sense of depth here, given the fact that, again, these are tiny. This is 11 inches by 11 inches. There's not a lot of room to work. And somehow they've managed to capture quite a lot of depth here. You get the sense of a sort of rapidly, sort of constantly uh, shifting space, right? Like there's a wind whipping across this hillside. Another honorable mention here. So again, with this, I keep coming back to tension. I feel like all of the pieces I selected are pieces that just really engage with this um, project of reconciling tensions, right? And this one is doing that in a different way to the many of the works we've seen previously. We're looking at something that's a little more surreal in nature, something that feels simultaneously like a moment that has emerged in the natural world and something that has been constructed by human hands or some hands that are able to design and fashion um, the world according to their preferences. There's also, again, a lot of depth happening in here. We have a real clear sense of very, very deep space behind this root or trunk-like structure. Really strong contrast between what feels to be more sort of naturally formed rocks and then something that feels almost artificial or synthetic in nature with this marble or I don't know what this form in the foreground is, but there's something that feels almost human about its construction. Moody, but still sort of lighthearted piece. And again, I mean, just keep an eye on the scales here when you're looking at the works. The piece that we're looking at here is very small. It's a 5-inch by 7-inch painting. But again, so much emotion packed into this tiny amount of real estate, right? It's very painterly, it's very loose. The brushwork feels very alive, but somehow still very precise in its description and also in the sort of emotional qualities that it evokes. The individual feels, I don't know, there's something wistful, maybe a little bit nostalgic, maybe something a little unsettled, while still really resting in a particular moment. I also just really appreciate the great variety of color that the artist is using. This one is a piece that simultaneously made me feel really nostalgic and also sort of giggle when I first saw it. Any of us who grew up with grandparents in that feeling of sitting on a grandparent's floor and playing with your toys, knowing that you're gonna there's also, I think, something really nostalgic in the color palette and the pairing of imagery with the object. There's a clear sort of insistence on the physical objecthood of this artwork. Obviously, it's photographic in nature, but um, juxtaposed with that, I don't even know. I'm not a fibers person, so I don't know if this is lace work or crochet. I don't know what to call this, but the juxtaposition of the material with the imagery just really establishes a clear sense of memory and bodily experience. And again, with the tension between the natural world and the man-made world, um, the humble and the precious. Um, this looks to be an allusion to driftwood or some little fragment of root or some crumbled, decomposing tree that seems to have some new life emerging from it. But that new life doesn't have that sense of organic chaos. There seems to be something more ordered to these emerging green forms that again speaks to something that's maybe a little synthetic or man-made. I think there's also, again, the craftsmanship feels really solid. The conversation between the positive and negative shape creates a lot of movement. Just a really dynamic, again, awkward and funny, sort of lighthearted, but also maybe a little anxiety-inducing visual shapes and and forms.
I hope that the artists and just the attendees, gain some insight into the awards and kind of what was Miss Hoover's mindset when choosing them and her process. So this is a 60th anniversary award. For those of you that checked out our Strokes of Genius exhibition, that we gave it out in that exhibition as well. It is an award that we at the MFA are giving out to pieces that we think evoke a sense of community, a sense of connectivity, because as all of you hopefully know, our mantra and kind of the purpose of our organization is connecting people through art. So David Schlesinger, congratulations. This is an award that we gave to your piece. Yeah, look out for this award in upcoming exhibitions. Like I said, it's for pieces that evoke a sense of community and connectivity, because that is what we are trying to promote at the MFA. So now we're going to open the floor to the attendees if you want to ask Ms. Hoover some questions.
Lillian, I do have a question. I'm curious to know how you go about choosing 3D work. So we can, of course, only see these three-dimensional pieces on a two-dimensional space when selecting work. So do you consider or try to imagine the form when selecting the work? Do you try to look at the materials and reimagine how it might look and feel in person? Is it a variety of things? Yeah, I would love to know.
The artists who submitted 3D work often included a detail shot or an alternate view of the work, which is very helpful. And it's really important for 3D artists to be mindful of how critical the documentation is in representing their work when they send it out into the world.
If you guys also want to talk about your piece, and feel free to say anything as well. We would all love to hear. I know we have at least a couple of the award winners in here. Lynn, I think something that's so exciting too is that MFA is able to reach artists from around the US. And thanks to the Zoom meetings, we can kind of congregate virtually and come to these talks together when we have the time to do so. So I do see familiar names and faces, and I think it's very exciting to share that we certainly do have people outside of Maryland as well who are here on this Zoom call.
Yeah. So I see a question from Ms. Farrell. She asked if you consider the names the artists give their pieces. So does the title of the piece play a part in how you think about it in your thought process?
And the way that I think of it is I'm a painter. So for me, title is, I think of it as essentially the last brushstroke on the work. It is absolutely part of the work, but it is not something to undertake lightly. I have seen works that are. I'm sorry? Maybe that was an accident. Titles can make or break the piece, right? Like a good title can be enormously beneficial in terms of directing the viewer how to think about the work, but it can also be a liability if it misdirects the viewer. And so I would just encourage folks to consider how the title is something integral to the work in the same way that the palette is, or the kind of metal you've chosen to cast the sculpture in, or the texture you've chosen to apply to the surface. So yeah, absolutely, titles are relevant. They're no more or less relevant than the work itself. It's all sort of bound up with the work.
I guess my question is, how important to you is depth in art, or is it more important given the scale is smaller?
That's a great question, Amani. I think specifically with these pieces that I was considering and during this exhibition, I think I was struck by the depth that was packed into some of them, primarily because of how hard that is to do on such a tiny scale. And just that's really impressive when you are able to achieve that quality. In terms of whether I'm inherently drawn to works that create a lot of depth, not necessarily. In fact, I'm personally often drawn to works that challenge or undermine a sense of depth, or invert a sense of depth, or flatten for various purposes, right? And I think the important thing to consider is not when I'm looking at art is not whether it conforms to something that I specifically like, but whether it's using its tools as effectively as it can in order to elicit the response it seems to be looking for from the viewer. And this piece, very clearly seems to be interested in creating that sense of depth. And I think it does it really well. But not every work is interested in trying to establish that sense of depth. And I think that there's absolutely a place for both approaches and any number of approaches in between.
Hey, I'm Catherine. I'm the artist that did the piece with the stone and the pink sphere. And I just
good.
wanted, so I just thought I'd let you know that rock that is in the front is actually a piece of green turquoise that actually has that face in the rock. I didn't make it up. It actually looks like that in real life.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love when we come upon those kinds of little treats. But the environment, was that a constructed kind of space?
Yes, that's often what I do in my work is I'll set up the objects in my studio and I'll paint from life, but then the background will all be like from my imagination. And I actually do play very heavily on breaking the rules of perspective so that I will have that great depth, like a very, very tiny little background. So that sense of depth plays a big role in my work. So it's kind of interesting that you picked up on that.
Hello, my name is Ruth. I'm the lady who made the ring with the box. I'm returning back to the art world after working for some 35 years. And it was very nice to hear that you liked the piece because of its poetry. I have been noticing that when I'm doing work now, I infuse everything with a certain amount of meaning and underpinning of story. And I don't know if that's an artifice or not. It really makes me happy when I use that to make objects. I'm really happy that you were able to get that sense of, well, poetry, story, whatever was underpinning the piece. Thank you, by the way.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for making a lovely object and putting it out into the world. When the first time I saw it, the first thing I thought was, this is a little personal reliquary. Like, it feels very much like.
You were asking about who we all are that were here. I am one of the artists in the show, but I would be here anyway. I try to come to all of these talks because I learned so much. And I just wanted to say thank you because this was excellent today. I learned so much from your observations and your comments. And I feel like I've just had a little class that will be really helpful. So
Oh, that's lovely. Which work is yours?
I especially have to work on my tensions. I can see that I don't do that enough. So I mean, seriously, that's helpful. So I have the little tiny encaustic. I'm an encaustic painter. Yeah. So
good.
Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been great.
You're very welcome. Thank you. That, if I'm remembering correctly, that work also has quite a lot of like many levels to it, right? Because you can see through, the encaustic is almost like a skin, right? Where you can kind of see through one layer to the next, and it starts to have that sense of things being encased or not quite buried, but somewhat obscured by subsequent layers.
Hi, I'm Jim Mackey. I did the piece Spiritual Math, and I didn't get an award, but thank you for including me in the show.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Spiritual Math, I'm trying to remember, I don't remember titles of every work, but I'll go back and look.
Less Than 3 had holy water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Excellent.
So I'm just giving you a face to the piece.
I appreciate that, Jim. It's nice to virtually meet you. Yeah, there's, again, the tension in the materials and juxtaposition between the found objects, just very dynamic and emotionally resonant.
A quick reiteration with Mr. Mackey is that it's been, I don't know, 43 years since I've had a class in art. So I wanted to thank you for this interaction because it's how your process of how you chose and what you're looking at and what you're looking for. And I had wondered, I knew when I read your bio that you were a two-dimensional artist, and I thought, oh, I got a 3D piece. Well, will that even get in the show? So that was pretty cool that you expounded on that, and I feel like I had a little art class tonight too.
Well, that's one of the things that I think we all struggle with when we teach or when we jury things, when we step outside of our own particular discipline, right? Is to try not to carry the criteria for how we would make our own work into selecting or evaluating the merits of someone else's work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to me not to pick all paintings or, like just because I'm a painter,
The teaching part of you shows through.
I just wanted to agree with Jim and thank you for including my work in the show. I personally love this show of Tiny Treasures. It's one of my favorites, and it's kind of like a goal for me to try to, get in each year. So that was nice. I thought it was interesting, your commentary about titling the work, because I'm kind of opposite. I start with the title. I did the little found object assemblage, Embrace Yourself as You Are, the little cowboy and the ballerinas. And as soon as I got that little cowgirl, which I had never seen a cowgirl before, I knew I wanted to say something about no matter what kind of female you are, that we're so much more than our reflection in the mirror. And so the title helps me to have my clear intention so it doesn't end up just being a pile of a junk drawer, So we all work differently and it's all exciting. It's all good.
I love that observation, particularly because, a lot of times when, so I'm going to take your description of the title as almost similar to like a prompt, right? Like right. And I think when I'm working with students, sometimes the students feel pressured to make work that is about something, right? Work that has meaning, work that has, gravitas. And that can be, for anyone who has tried to work that way, that can be really intimidating, or you can sort of think yourself into a corner. And so one of the things that I talk about often with my students is that artwork sometimes starts with the idea, and then you find the form. And sometimes it starts with the form and then you find the idea, and both are valid. Both are completely legitimate. It's really a matter of paying attention to when and where those things come together, right? And so you might start with the idea or the title. In your case, the title seems to be sort of an expression of the idea, like a 3-word poem or something like that, right? And then the visual components come after, right? And for somebody else, it might be the exact opposite, right? It might take a long time to get to the words, but that doesn't mean that it's any less legitimate just because you had to discover what it meant as you made the work.
Yeah, I want to thank you for including my work in the exhibition. I didn't win an award, but it was like getting an award to be in this show because I was using a medium that I'm not used to. I'm an oil painter and I was using gouache. And the reason was I'd had knee surgery and I wasn't able to drag all my painting supplies for doing oil. And that was actually the first piece of plein air that I did after my surgery. And I just dragged myself up to Hamden in Baltimore and did that little piece. And I just couldn't believe it when you chose it. So thank you.
Well, excellent. Remind me which piece is yours, if you could describe it.
It was called Hamden Play Alley.
Oh yeah, this is lovely, Catherine. And I think your decision to work with the material that you could, given the particular limitations you found yourself in, is just such a delight. And I think that's, sort of the hallmark of being a creative person, is if you need to make something, you need to make something. I think you captured a really nice little moment there.
Well, thank you.
The reality of living in an urban kind of space, right? You don't necessarily have a playground to go play in.
Not a
Great.
question, but I'm one of the artists in the show. I had the piece with the light filtering through the hands.
Ah, love it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say thank you, and everything that you said, I feel like more than anyone who's ever commented on my work before, you really got it, and I really appreciated that. So thank you.
Excellent. Good. I mean, it just really does have that sense of, somebody desperately trying to hold it in or get it out.
Yes.
It just is, it's just as clear as day. I think you expressed that wonderfully.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's part of a series of 3 paintings that I did, all with light emanating from the body, expressing that feeling of having to filter yourself, keep things in when only let certain parts through. And yeah.
Well done. And I think all of the crazy reflected light and color that's bouncing around in there is so exciting, and dynamic, and just adds to the sense of life. And that there's this quote, I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. The painter Richard Diebenkorn. He talks about, he was talking about some piece that he had made, and the phrase was that he was looking for strength in reserve, tension beneath the calm. And that phrase has always stuck with me. And I really see that in this painting, that strength in reserve, tension beneath the calm.
If no one has anything else to say, I want to thank Ms. Hoover so much for her time today. Very insightful, very candid in how she spoke about the art. Really good explanations into her thought process and her thinking. To all the artists, thank you so much for your time. It's not free to make art. I think we all know that. But really appreciate you guys for even submitting to our show, because that's what keeps us going.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to look over all of your pieces. It was really a pleasure.
I think that's all for today. Thank you all again. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And thank you again for coming and spending some time with us. So everyone take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hope to see you in Circle Gallery.